See, what he's doing is he's showing you relatable characteristics of God that you can see just by thinking about what you can observe.
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious. People's ability to use language to communicate this way, he was the one that pulled it together. He's kind of like the Mises of theological explainers. See, before guys like this, all you had were guys that were just carrying around birthrights and costumes and saying, this is what God said, and I'm the one that's in charge of telling you what God said. And that was basically it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could use like the results in people's lives from following what God said as evidence that it's valid and something that you should believe in, right? But this takes it to another level entirety. It takes that whole I don't feel like it nature of walking away from God. It doesn't just let that stand. It says you're actually walking away from concepts which we can understand logically, independent of whether or not you believe in something.
Three, 2, 1, and we're back. It's been a while, everyone, but the Doug Life has continued with episode number 204 with the one and only Professor Phil. Get ready to get fucking triggered on this one. Phil's got his master's degree on triggering people. And if you've never heard any episodes with Phil before, you will find out he is the real deal here.
Yeah, and I'm fully aware. I'm very odd. People don't.
I don't know if odd's the way to put it. Big Bookie back in this bitch. You already know it, Ginger Jesus. Thanks for tuning in, buddy.
Hello,
Phil. We got a lot to catch up on, my friend.
Indeed.
Don't worry. Hey, actually, Ginger Jesus, I gave him a Delta 8 gummy before we started. So maybe that will help like simmer him down. Or maybe it'll help like get him more wild up.
Will it make everyone less stupid?
Yeah, I think actually, I think weed actually would make everyone less stupid in the long term, but not in the short term.
But me ingesting one of these little goodies isn't going to help with that. Everybody's still stupid. Anyway, so
is our government stupid for overturning Roe versus Wade? I sure think so. I think they're beyond stupid.
Well, the government,
and I think we're just moving backwards.
Okay. Well, first, the government didn't. It was turn a 50, it over. It was it's a decision by the Supreme Court to essentially
the Supreme Court a part of the government.
Well, it is. I mean, it's a branch of the federal government.
Overturned Roe versus Wade.
Generally, when you say the government did something, you're talking about the legislature creating a law, passing it, president signs it, blah, blah, blah. When it's the Supreme Court acting on a legal case that comes before them, it's the Supreme Court. Now, regardless of where you stand on the morality, just the need pragmatically for abortion, Roe v. Wade, that decision was terrible. It was just terrible law. It doesn't even resemble law. It's an artificial construction that was created by the justices sitting on the court at the time in order to inject a catalyst for the current political manipulations that were going on at that time. You'd already passed the Great Society and turned half of a generation into welfare moms. I mean, the rate at which the Great Society destroyed families is unbelievable. But then you cobble together a right to privacy out of the actual things that are listed in the Constitution. See, the only way you can get to a right to privacy is through making the assertion that there are implications made by the strict text that already exists. I mean, everybody knows that if you read the Constitution, you don't see the word abortion. You also don't see the right to privacy. So where does it generate from? Well, it generates from them
using fancy big words and using language to deceive people.
It's the concept of being secure in your property and your papers. I believe that's Fourth Amendment, and just the general concept of freedom of association. Now, the problem that Supreme Court in, what is it, 72 or 73, and going all the way back to the signing of the Constitution, which basically eliminated all of the natural rights that anybody had, regardless of where they're listed. If you want to imply that a person can interrupt the natural course of a new human being coming into existence out of a right, if you believe that privacy somehow implies that, well, then you have to look at the basics that they derived the privacy right from, correct?
Okay.
But what does the government do on those fronts?
So you're saying
it contradicts the things that they derive the privacy from on a daily basis.
So they derive the Roe versus Wade law from the same privacy law that they made.
Yeah, what they said was
they use the same concept from what they written for the privacy one for the Roe versus Wade one.
Yeah, and everybody who was engaged in bringing the case forward knew that it had no substance whatsoever. I mean, states make all sorts of rules about what you can and can't do in relationship to health and whatnot. So the idea that you want to throw away your baby because you made a severe mistake by exposing yourself to the potential of being pregnant when you have no business doing that.
Yeah, but people make mistakes, Phil.
Yes, people do make mistakes. If you make a mistake in other realms of life, you get penalized.
And getting an abortion is a pretty fucking big penalty on a woman's mental health, on her body, just her whole life.
Oh, it is.
Even a man. So yeah. I think that having to carry around the weight of that is penalty enough.
Well, we're only getting started.
We are.
The number of contradictions involved in this contemporary viewpoint of abortion on demand is just staggering. There's not a coherent line of thought in it anywhere. And when somebody states their position on this absolute free-for-all, dismembering 9-month, due date babies, and in some cases, in some of these places and some of these doctors, they actually deliver the baby and then kill it.
Well, I've seen I've watched a lot of videos of even people who are pro-choice, and the majority of them agree that once you get into like the third trimester, that's the last one, once you're in that late pregnancy, they become pro-life. And it becomes really tricky. It's like, okay, so I know some states have like the heartbeat law. It's like as soon as you detect the heartbeat. Which is
an excellent compromise.
Yes.
Because
I think that's a happy medium.
One, science in no way supports this nonsensical idea that it's not a life.
Does science have to support everything?
Freaking ridiculous. Well, they're the ones who say they're scientific.
Science doesn't support God.
I don't need science to explain my position on abortion. All I need is logic. You want to go?
I want to hear it.
You want to go through the derivation?
Yeah.
It's very simple.
Okay.
Do living things come from non-living things?
Well, that's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg.
And that's part of the scientific failure of their entire platform of nonsense. That single, it's like third grade science class.
Mm-hmm.
Living, non-living, and dead.
A living thing can't
those are the only categories.
I would say a living thing cannot come from a non-living thing.
Exactly.
Except the very first humans created. Because those were probably created by God.
Exactly.
Or they were created by a cell, or God created the cells, and then the cells then created humans. I don't fucking know.
Just as a small aside,
we're trying to figure out
if you've
how
never
humans got created here.
If you've never been exposed to any of the commentary concerning the absolute mathematical ridiculous mess that the idea of the spontaneous generation of a living cell, it's absolutely incredible with that material out there that anybody could possibly believe in it anymore. It's so stupid.
Even with the logic, every living thing has to come from a living thing. It's like, okay, so what created the first cell, though? It's like it goes back like infinitely because everything how it always had to create that next thing. Logically, I understand what Phil's saying here. There has to be some sort of God or higher entity that we don't understand that created the first thing, which then started the chain off.
Yeah.
Ginger Jesus says dinosaurs came before the chicken and the egg. I think that's true. Dinosaurs came before everything.
No, all living things that you can find by digging up dirt and splitting rocks and stuff, the great majority of all of that life died in the flood and was buried and turned to fossils.
Let me ask you something.
And now we dig it up and we listen to morons who think that finding a rock with an imprint on it tells you anything about how long ago anything happened.
Let me ask you something.
It's the stupidest platform that exists.
Did dinosaurs die from the asteroid or from the flood?
No, there's no asteroid.
So they died in the flood?
Yeah.
What about the sea dinosaurs? How would the flood kill them?
See, you have to understand the scale of it. When you go to the Grand Canyon and you see the Great Staircase or whatever it is that they talk about, that's the kind of scale that you have to consider. And since God made a promise that would never be done again, there are no other events like that you can observe the results of. That's why it's the definition of what you see when you dig in the ground.
I would still think sea dinosaurs would be able to survive the flood. Because it's not like adding more, you can't drown them. So how would adding more water get rid of them?
They're buried. See, that's the whole thing. The scale of the flood and the impact that it had on the existing landscape is so traumatic. Not even anything that's in the water. And you know what? Now that I think about it really hard, what it says,
logic doesn't make sense.
What it says in the story, I can't actually specifically remember if it actually talks about the water life, because it doesn't say anything about Noah going out to collect fish or anything that lives in the water.
And what about the air dinosaurs? Are we just going to chalk those up to lightning? Lightning got those ones?
Well,
they died in the sky?
If it storms for 40 days and does what it says in the Bible, the only things to survive are on the ark.
Why didn't Noah bring any dinosaurs on the ark? I think you have bought like at least one. Like some of the plant eaters, at least the long necks. Why didn't Noah bring a long neck? We could have long necks right now if he decided to bring a pair.
He
fucked up.
The numbers of dinosaurs that are, pulled out of the ground, it's kind of like the early hominid species. And there are all sorts of just complete atheist scientists out there who do work that show that you've got humans and dinosaurs, they're next to each other. This deep time thing isn't real, but you have to go and find the commentary because it's all over the place if you go looking for it. Now, if you only take the recommended videos off of YouTube that want to tell you about how this stupid telescope they supposedly put in orbit is seeing the edge of the universe and shit, if that's the kind of stuff you like to watch, you're never going to run into this kind of material. And it's what you need in order to get any kind of a sense of what these people are saying about what they can do with these devices. What's really weird is that since this modern epic of supposedly breaking down the fundamentals of the material universe, they haven't actually done any real science. What they do is they build gadgets and they predict a result and they don't get it, and so then they do a smudge thing and the whole picture gets more complicated. Up until that point where the whole quantum electrodynamics frickin' thing got started and this stupid particle model, the standard model of physics, it does the opposite of what real science does. And that's where that video that I sent you about the proton-electron mass ratio.
Mm-hmm. That shit was way over my head, by the way.
His name is Alexander Unziker. He's absolutely brilliant because he at some point he stepped back and said to himself, what's really being done? See, he was an apostle. He was a disciple of the mainstream accepted, all of these crazy speculations that these people make. And he said, I'm looking at the history leading up to this point, and nothing that we're doing reflects what occurred while we were actually advancing our understanding. It's the opposite. Every single time somebody, and this I take this directly from him because I've watched him discuss the instances that he's talking about, the leaps, the steps that have been taken over time. Basically, you get to Galileo and Kepler and then Newton and Huygens and from there, those guys, what they were doing is they were finding the speculated powers that were controlling things that the actual material and their motions and the things that we can watch happen, they just follow relationships. And so what they did is they basically wiped the board of a bunch of entities controlling how all of the things work. And I said, well, no, these are basic influences and relationships that always hold, and they did experiments to show that they hold. And over time, you move from motion to energy and heat and light and how all of that works. It's how you get optics. It's how you end up
sound,
figuring out how electricity works, acoustics, all of these things. They're not
big sound.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many of those observable relationships that have been looked at and understood, and we have mathematical relationships that allow us to have successful predictive power to engineer technologies that can actually make people better at doing things. And it should be about getting stuff done, not about making gadgets. And that's what's happened.
But you make gadgets to get stuff done, though.
But if you're building a gadget to do something that you never do, what's
the definition
happening
of America, dude? People buying gadgets for something that they never do.
These accelerators that they're building, all it does is it just creates a cycle, and the fundamentals at the core of the thing themselves have to be misunderstandings of what reality truly is in order for this to go this way.
I think for some of the gadget making, sometimes it's just it's not why, it's why not.
You want to know what it is?
Like when you're a scientist and you want to make some cool fucking gadgets, it's like, I don't know, why shouldn't I make a bunch of fans that light up in somebody's computer and make them go to music and they have a fucking really cool lighting effect?
Yeah, see,
it doesn't always have to have some like deep meaning or have some really fucking like purposeful use of it. It's just a why not case. Yeah. It's a lot of time with the gadgets.
Pure consumer products.
Yeah. And that's what America is.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, we really are. We're burying ourselves in bullshit with the way this is going right now.
I'll read some messages in the chat here. They recently found a preserved tail of a dinosaur. It had feathers. Interesting.
Yeah.
I assume was it a bird? Nothing is real. We are all the same entity experiencing the torment of life because we are the advanced beings we are talking about. A simulation of life is the only way we learn what being a human is. We are God experiencing itself. Smoke DMT and listen to Gucci Man. Tell me.
Oh my God.
Tell me he's not Jesus. I'm a dog. Gucci Man's not Jesus, though. He's a dog. And then last one, listen to the Uniplanetary evolution theory. Are you familiar with that one?
Uniplanetary evolution theory?
We'll have to check that out, Ginger Jesus.
No, I guess I don't. I haven't heard that one.
Stuff, or even if you want to send me some stuff about it, and maybe when you're in town, we can do the pod about it.
Hey, that'd be fun. I guess my biases online haven't gotten me recommended anything about that. Is it at all related to the Urantia book? Let's see if we get a response. Have you heard of the Urantia book?
I have not.
The Urantia book is basically. I believe the guy that wrote it was originally a Christian, but the way what he was doing is he was looking at the idea of Christianity and trying to combine it with all this deep space, deep time nonsense, and he came up with actually a really creative idea. And this idea was each planet or region of the universe has its own Christ, and that God has many children who fulfill that role all over the universe. It's a pretty interesting concept, and the book the guy wrote is just gigantic.
Well, that would make sense though when you think about it logically. Like, what if there is other life out there in the universe? Do they have religion? Or maybe the better question to ask is, do they have religion, or do they have God, or do they have both?
Well, they would have...
I think there's a difference between having religion and having God.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah. Absolutely. You don't need religion for God. Adam and Eve didn't have religion. They walked alongside God and had conversations with him.
Did they ever identify as Christian, Adam and Eve? Was there ever any writing in the Bible that were no. Adam and Eve are Christian?
No, it works. It's the other way around. Christ is a descendant of Adam, but he's also God's son.
Okay.
Well, we didn't get a response there. Should I ask again?
No, it's all good.
Okay. Boy, this is really. Boy, we kind of gone all.
We kind of took a left turn there. Well, sorry, he said sorry left. What happened?
Okay.
It's okay.
No, I wanted
Phil asked you something.
I wanted to ask you about something else that I've seen. It's called the Urantia book, and I'm just wondering if it's at all related to that.
About your uniplanetary evolution theory. We were reading messages off in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, just as a short aside, the idea that we are God experiencing itself. It's a rewording of Satan's original plea to Eve. It's so, I mean, the whole story ties everything together so well. Human beings have wills, and they make choices, and they have the capacity to be tempted, scared, brought to anger, all of these different characteristics that we have. Now, I've actually written a little blurb about this and that physics stuff that we were talking about before. And the Unzicker guy, he likes to talk about pursuing the avenue that eventually eliminates all constants of nature, because what these steps in science over time, the successful ones, what they do is they find a method to actually calculate something that was previously measured. And once you have the ability to calculate simply from the magnitudes and quantities of relationships and things like that, where there are no units like kilograms or seconds or time or anything, that's when you make real progress. And what has happened...
How can you measure something without not knowing, okay, this is a small amount, this is a large amount, with no scale of units.
Can you count things?
Yeah, but that's a scale though. Also,
yeah, but it's not a unit; it's only a quantity, and that's where numbers come from. Numbers are our level of being able to understand the material concept of quantity. That's all numbers are.
Mhm.
And you can do a lot of bizarre stuff with them, and you can
use them to manipulate people, use them to sound like you're smart, use them to get jobs, use them to get degrees.
And use
them to make money. You can use numbers for a lot of things.
Do you know what else you find out when you go back and you look at the history of science? I happen to have taken an upper division history of 19th century physics
jerk on everyone. Tell them what degrees you got.
Well, I just have a bachelor's of science in physics from the University of Minnesota.
Physics, I mean, that's a pretty good degree.
The math got too intense for me. But do you know what?
What was the highest math class you took?
I took one class that was called Calculus 7.
Calculus 7? Fuck, dude, I didn't even take pre-calc.
I can't even remember what was in that. But the worst one that I took was it was called Fourier transforms in series. And what you use it for, I mean, it's very useful, but understanding how the functions and all of the tricks to deriving things and solving equations and shit works, it just got beyond me, because it's just an absolute sea of known identities and exceptions and all this stuff, and I can't tolerate it. The real advances in science, they're always made after people recognize relationships. And the funny part about that is that economy is the same way. Today nobody studies economy now. What they do is they fidget with econometrics. They go out and collect data and they shove numbers into equations, and then they make bad predictions. It's just god awful. It's an absolute freaking mess. Whereas Mises figured out how the reality of human beings doing things and interacting with each other and what the logical implications are. And then from there, you start using quantity and math to illustrate the idea that requires no math at all. Like when you talk about how people value things, human beings do not calculate value. They order value. And it's the only way that people taking steps in time can be understood to actually function.
I feel like there's something very natural about us valuing things also. I was never taught in school or even like by my parents or anyone how to value something. That's something that's like inherently just coded. You know what I mean? Like in our brains. Like ever since we're a young kid, like we value this toy more than the other toy. That's in our instincts here. After you get going, Ginger Jesus responded to you. But say what you were going to say if you want to first.
Oh, okay.
Read it out loud so people who are just listening to this can hear him too. What he's saying.
Okay.
Or do you want me to read it out loud?
Okay, so now I don't know if he's talking about the uniplanetary. Okay, he's talking about the uniplanetary evolution theory, not the Urantia book, I'm guessing.
Correct. So he says basically the theory is that the sun is basically a power source that causes a time loop in our solar system. The gray aliens, in quotations, are humans who escaped this loop and evolved for eternity. And every planet.
It's got to be planet.
Yeah, and every planet is Earth. That was a typo, by the way. I know how to read. Is Earth in a different phase of time consistency, time constantly, maybe I can't read, repeating. Basically, semi-explains deja vu. It's really, really interesting, but obviously unprovable.
Exactly.
Well, God's not provable either.
No.
There's a lot of things that are unprovable. It doesn't mean they're not real.
You can't prove God's existence scientifically because science is something that we do and apply it to material, which God is beyond. I actually have an idea for...
God, you know what? I just took a philosophy class, and there's this one old school philosopher. I can't remember his name now, of course, now that I'm doing a pod. but he thought of 5 ways that it's funny.
You're talking about Thomas Aquinas.
I think so.
Yeah, the 5 proofs.
Yeah, the 5 proofs. But you know what? It was interesting while I'm taking this philosophy class. All these famous philosophers, they all try to prove something that can't be proved, and they get famous for it because other people aren't smart enough to prove them wrong. And then some other asshole comes along and goes, "Oh no, you're wrong because there's a contradiction right here in this thing." And then that guy gets famous because he proved this guy wrong. It's just a giant circle jerk.
I could tell you one thing. I have never seen any of these the atheist pontificators. Not one of them ever does anything to damage
the 5
Aquinas.
truths, you said what it's called?
Oh, the 5 proofs.
5 proofs. I want to look it up. We're going to read the 5 proofs.
It's from the Summa.
Oh, it's called the 5 ways, actually. Okay, so I remember this one. The argument is the first mover. He calls it the 5 proofs, but they're really, I want to say the first 3 or maybe even 4 of them, they're they're the exact same thing. He just changes the fucking word in it. So I want to read the first one here.
We actually ended up with Aquinas. I would have never predicted that.
Do you like this guy, Aquinas?
Oh, absolutely. I actually took I took a shot at trying to read his the Summa Theologica. Good grief, it's dense. I didn't get very far.
Okay, here's the summary of it. I'm going to put the screen up for you guys. This is the first one. The argument of the unmoved mover.
Mm-hmm.
In the world, we can see that at least things are changing.
Some things
are changing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Whatever is changing is being changed by something else. If that by which it is changing is itself change, then it too is being changed by something else. But this chain cannot be infinitely long. And it's funny, because this ties in back to what we were talking about earlier with how humans were created, if cells created them or if God created them. And I remember I brought up to Phil, well, if a cell created it, there would be that infinite chain where it just goes on forever. So this is Aquinas is saying right now that just can't be logically possible.
And this isn't weird.
Let me finish this quick. But this chain cannot be infinitely long. So there must be something that causes change without itself changing. This everyone understands to be God.
And see, it was a little easier for him because everybody understood that God created the universe when he wrote this.
Yeah.
There weren't any...
It was easier back then to prove God existed before they fucking had computers and shit.
Well, pretty much everybody operated under, they operated under a belief that maybe it's not the same, like the Romans and the Greeks with their pantheons and the people in India and in China and Africa and basically everywhere that the Jews weren't, they all had pantheons. And there's another entire universe of commentary out there about what that actually represents. If you go looking for it, you can find it. And once you find the guys that are actually good at it, they actually look at historical documentation and the commentaries from people who were living in those times or after, writing histories, whatever. You can pretty much tie together all of the pantheons of the world and identify the same characteristics in, and it's usually funny. How many are there generally in the major pantheon of multiple gods? Do you know?
Well, in Christianity, there's just one, but overall, in some religions, there are fucking thousands. I want to say in
well, major and minor, but the ones at the top.
And some of the Eastern religions, like Buddhism, I know Greek, they have hundreds of gods.
The Hindus have like 30 million or something. It's some ridiculous number. 12.
Dill pickle chip god.
The number's 12.
For what?
The heads of the pantheons. There's usually some kind of a head figure, like a Zeus or a Jupiter. They're the same guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then in a lot of the stories, the gods that they're worshiping aren't even the first generation. There's always a story about how they're the heroic entity that slew the prior head guy. What does that sound like?
What do you think?
It's so crazy.
Do you think there's a chance a new religion could ever be created or be discovered, I should say?
No, we're living in it.
In the future, and that takes over Christianity, and constantly new religions are getting discovered, and all these all of our today religions just get flushed out.
Now, do you notice how the world functions right now? The main impetus of the destruction of humanity takes place through Christianity.
So here, let's go back to Aquinas here. I want you to read the second one. Also, real quick, I want to explain for the first one, just to clear things up. Basically, what he's saying, nothing can move itself or create itself. Therefore, it all started with God. But I think this first one is even more so about momentum and movement itself, like kind of like the earth spinning or just anything moving around, turning. God created that first one because something can't just turn by itself, is the argument that he made. I think this first one is specifically about movement.
Well, once we get done with these, I'm going to tell you what my way of trying to explain to people what we actually like our existence. If you were to try and relate it mathematically,
okay,
which is what he does. He uses a mathematical concept, infinity.
Okay, but there's a couple ones where he's easily contradicted here, and I think it might be the second one. You want to take it over?
Sure.
Do the summary of it. Like I said, the argument of
the argument of the first cause.
Yep.
In the world, we can see that things are caused, but it's not possible for something to be the cause of itself, because this would entail that it exists prior to itself, which is a contradiction. If that by which it is caused is itself caused, then it too must have a cause. But this cannot be an infinitely long chain, so there must be a cause which is not itself caused by anything further. This, everyone understands to be God. See, what he's doing is he's showing you relatable characteristics of God that you can see just by thinking about what you can observe.
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious. People's ability to use language to communicate this way, he was the one that pulled it together. He's kind of like the Mises of theological explainers. See, before guys like this, all you had were guys that were just carrying around birthrights and costumes and saying, this is what God said, and I'm the one that's in charge of telling you what God said. And that was basically it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could use like the results in people's lives from following what God said as evidence that it's valid and something that you should believe in, right? But this takes it to another level entirety. It takes that whole I don't feel like it nature of walking away from God. It doesn't just let that stand. It says you're actually walking away from concepts which we can understand logically, independent of whether or not you believe in something. And he phrases it in a way that you can't deny.
Not that one you can.
And then the phrase on the end,
yeah,
this everyone understands to be God. It's like the only reason he even needed to make the explanation is because of, followers of the adversary trying to tear people's belief down.
But he does. He tries to use this same line of argument.
So let's go to the next one.
It's either the second one or the third one. Well, it's kind of easy to prove him wrong.
Well, it's not really easy to prove him wrong. What's easy is to say that the way he uses the language, to make the point, you can poke holes in
use it for everything,
but not the spirit of what he's saying. Those first two are ironclad.
Okay, we'll see. The argument of first cause.
No, we're on tertiary, tertia via. The argument from contingency.
No, we never did this one.
We did the unmoved mover. We did the first cause. Now we're on the argument from contingency.
No, we didn't do the first cause.
Yes, we did. I just read it.
No, you had the explanation for the first one.
In the world, we can see that things are caused. I did that one.
Let's see. Maybe that Delta 8's kicking in here.
I'll do the third one.
Okay, sounds good. Start with the summary.
In the world, we see things that are possible to be and possible not to be. The impossible. In other words, perishable things. But if everything were contingent and thus capable of going out of existence, then nothing would exist now. But things clearly do exist now. Therefore, there must be something that is imperishable, a necessary being. This everyone understands to be God. It is just as ironclad as the first two.
No, so I think with this one, that's basically what he's saying is, I can think of God, but I can't think of anything greater than God. Therefore, God exists.
What this is he's expositing on there is no such thing as something from nothing. He's just analyzing it from already being and seeing that things come and go. Things do not just come on their own.
I'm reading it here.
So the explanation, what do they say in there? I mean, is this explanation supposed to show you why it's not valid or something? Or
no, I think it is just supposed to help you break it down anymore. Okay, so we'll read the explanation of the summary Phil just read. The argument begins with the observation that things around us come into and go out of existence. Animals die, buildings are destroyed. If everything were like this, then at some time nothing would exist. Some interpreters read Aquinus to mean that assuming an infinite past, all possibilities would be realized and everything would go out of existence. So I guess this is where you start beginning, like, will there ever be a day where it's like the end of the world, but not even go greater than that, say end of the universe?
Well, if there's one thing that you can say concretely for absolute certain is that what he says in the summary there absolutely deletes the idea that the universe or time singularly is infinite, because there is no way. If you say that something goes into the infinite past and the pattern that you observe is that things come and go, well, an infinite amount of time would have wiped everything out. That's what he's saying. It's very straightforward. But reading the little explanation there kind of makes it a little bit more specifically aimed at the infinite past part of the protests that people will present.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Since this is clearly not the case, then there must be at least one thing that does not have the possibility of going out of existence. However, this explanation seems to involve the fallacy of composition. Moreover, it does not seem to be in keeping with Aquinas' principle that among natural things, the destruction of one thing is always the generation of another.
That's not a contradiction at all. How is that?
This person at Wikipedia says that your shit's a contradiction, Phil.
No, he says that in this particular item that he's contradicting, it's directly in line with that principle.
The quantifier shift, the fallacy of a composition.
The destruction of one thing is always the generation of another as we observe stuff. It doesn't say anything at all about God's different nature from what we observe. That's stupid.
Maybe you should just go in there and edit.
There's no point in editing Wikipedia. It's fucking pointless. It's full. About the only thing you can really rely on it for is sports stats.
I think that's the only really thing you can rely on the internet for. Oh, that and porn.
That was one of the things that
sports stats and porn.
That prior pod.
Yeah,
I actually brought that up. I said, "When's the last time you went onto the internet with a question of any significance and actually were able to find an answer that you could trust?"
Yeah.
It never.
And fucking Doug Life says Ginger Jesus. You're goddamn right. Okay, I want to read.
Yeah.
I want to read the fourth one quick.
Okay.
There's one of these that basically, from my understanding of it, it may have been the third one. It's something how it's how he can think God into existence, and he can't think of anything greater than God. Therefore, God must exist.
Oh, I have that
But
answer.
basically, the contradiction there is that you can think of anything in your head that's so fucking great.
There's a problem. And it's kind of like the alien seeding life explanation for how life began here. So you've got two substantial views that hold any weight with people generally. God created life. Life spontaneously generated itself from inert material. One is obviously very stupid, and the other one follows the tradition of all people who have ever lived. That's first off. If you want to, you want to try and erase what all of humanity has known from day one and replace it with other thing, one of their best ideas, all it is basically, it's a direction to don't actually pay attention to the question at hand, draw another borderline and put that question on the outside of that border. All you're doing is changing the number of levels you have to sift through to actually find the answer. You haven't done anything when you say that aliens seeded life on Earth. It doesn't tell you anything about where life came from. Something else was alive and put us here. That doesn't do anything to the question.
Yeah,
it's the stupidest. Oh my God! I want to physically strangle people who promote that.
It may not do anything to that question when that question is specifically targeting human religions, like, Christianity and God and whatnot. Because I think those people can make the argument, well, aliens brought us here, therefore we created our gods. Mm-hmm. But we may not have created the God. And I think that's what you're trying to say. Because to me, logically, that makes sense. No. If we were put here by aliens, then all religions on our planet are man-made.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that people are so desperate to recruit people to their nonsense, and they understand that most people will never commit any time to actually thinking about any of this. So what they do is they come up with propaganda pieces that don't actually even affect the question at hand. What they do is they give you a poster or a slogan or something that makes you feel good that actually removes the question from your description of whatever the issue is. They do it constantly. And the idea that this is an absolute switcheroo. It's intellectual deception. A person that points at the arguments that Aquinas is making here and saying that he's somehow the mental midget because he can't imagine anything greater than God, that's the most childish way to go about this there could possibly be. What Aquinas is trying to do is he's trying to make it as clear as it can possibly made in the language and conceptualizing of the time that people were capable of. And he's saying, this actually, it helps you accept the truth. So which one is a better measure? Calling into question the writer's character or capacity because he doesn't take this arbitrary step? What the hell? It's just like the alien seeding life thing. Well, what if there's something greater than God? Well, all you did is draw a bigger question around, a bigger border around everything that we're talking about and say, what if?
Aquinas is basically saying here, you can't do the infinite loop, the infinite pass. Eventually, you got to draw the circle about all the bullshit and the answer to their stupid question is already in the argument that they claim to be poking holes in. Yeah.
It's so infinitely stupid. Have you ever heard of the list of all lists?
The list of all lists?
Yeah.
No.
There's no such thing.
Yeah.
Because sounds every time you make one, you have another list to put on the list. See how that works?
So that's
what these people do.
So you just have one master list. And every time another list gets added, it gets magically fucking written on there.
Every time, okay, you've got 5 lists.
Yeah.
Right?
Jesus says, imagine God's dad. Life created God. You're drawing the bigger circle around it, Ginger.
Wait a second.
Imagine God's dad. Life created God. God created life, but life gave God his godliness. Therefore, life created God. Which came first, God or religion?
No, that's actually an interesting thing. The thing that we have to understand is that there was something before us, but they were all entities that were capable of existing within the infinite infinites that I think God represents. And the reason I actually came up with this is when people suffer, right? One of the things that my thoughts always go back to is the cross. And the idea, the fact that people can't accept the idea, it's so funny. They run around talking about good and bad, but they can't accept the idea of sin and the fact that our nature makes us susceptible to doing those things. If there is something beyond life, that there is some kind of a measure of what you did here, but that because we are what we are, we're subjects. We're created. We don't have the ability to pay the sin debt. That's why Christ died. Christ died to pay for our sins. And that's why faith in Christ is how you get to heaven.
So
there's
use
no
the word,
other line of thinking that comprehends it that way.
Well, you use the word sin debt. So I think that you could bring up the question is, will our sin debt get so high, someone else will have to make the same sacrifice Christ did to restart it?
It's a singular event. And you can see it.
He paid them off for every boys and girls. You can sit away.
You can see it in how the epics of God's creation have played themselves out. I mean, you've got thousands of years, and you have all of these pages written by the prophets of the Israelites, hundreds of details that were all satisfied by one individual. God told these people about who was coming. They know themselves. They're still waiting because they couldn't take what's out of their own eye before going after other people for being blind. They're the worst offenders. They were the ones chosen to be the people that would receive him. But, God knows that people are frickin' stubborn. They couldn't follow the one single rule they were given at the beginning. Don't eat from that one. That's the only that's the only way that you can actually for human beings to be what we are. If there's no ability to choose the other, then we're just automatons. And that's not what God did not intend for us to behave like automatons. I think it's pretty obvious that human beings are not like that. How many more millennia of observation do we need to understand that? Now I'm kind of lost on exactly what. So we were on here, and then we were up here, and we were talking. Okay, it's about
a good one.
How life.
Jesus says that Delta 8 is kicking in for sure.
How life actually creates God's godliness.
Should tell everyone they have to pop a Delta 8 before they listen to this episode.
There's a little bit to be said for that idea, but I think it illustrates how we're kind of forced to look at everything from our own limited perspective. And this infinite thing that I was starting to talk about, Christ's suffering on the cross. And then not only that, when human beings interact with each other and they do things to physically, mentally, in whatever respect, cause harm to another, what we feel, our capacity for those feelings and the ability to recognize and empathize and all of the good and everything, these are all the the numerable. See, we have measurable capacities for these things.
Mm-hmm.
Where do those things come from? It's almost like we were all given Dragon Balls of different capacities and emotional types. They're constricted. They're made with limit from something without limit. And so I like a good way to get people to actually measure their own actions would be to communicate to them that if you think human beings are able to feel suffering in a multiple number of ways, just imagine being the parent of all of us and feeling every single instance like that occurs in an infinite capacity. It just,
you can't comprehend it.
Then how do you go forward and steal from someone? How do you go forward with that idea and assault someone? How do you do that?
That idea that we're all brothers and sisters and we're all family because we all came from the one creator. How can we go and do that?
Just having the thought in your head that there is an extrapolation of your suffering that you can't measure, that God always feels. I don't know how anybody could take in an idea like that and not, at least to some degree, improve their behavior.
So you should always behave as if God exists.
Well, that's a Jordan Peterson.
I know, is what you're saying.
I just think that, his little Poisson square thing that he does about where you're good or bad and then God exists or doesn't.
Yeah.
The only
But I feel like
option,
that's like of something that I brought that up because that's
a good little logical application.
Well, I pulled it off of everything that you just said, though.
I
think you took that one line and you explained it for people.
I like to think I added something that nobody has really.
Okay, I'll give you that. Yeah,
I've never.
Okay.
I can't. I would love to have somebody give me a source that what I've just said actually comes from without me knowing it. Maybe I've just read so many different people that I've actually mixed all their stuff into one idea that actually just comes from a number of other people. I don't know. But I don't think I've ever heard it.
Well, I feel like
I
feel like we're at a point also. There's just so much information out there, and there's so many different philosophers and all these, like scientists and all these old guys. It's like everyone studies them, so it's hard not to bite their style a little bit. But everyone kind of also, they take what they've learned from them, and they either create something new and different, or they take what they said and put their own twist on things. And maybe they're saying the same thing, but it's gonna be what a modern twist on whatever time period they were living in at the time.
Yeah, And I think
it's like you told me the quote, "Nothing new under the sun."
Mm-hmm.
It's like that.
That's
Everything's
Solomon.
been done before. Everything's been said before.
Yep.
But you got to think of different ways to articulate it, because Weed and Aquinus right now, I feel like it's tougher to comprehend until you have someone to explain it in more modern terms.
Yeah, well, and I've probably had at least 3 academic confrontations with this material when I was in school. I mean, I went to Catholic school all the way through high school. I was actually at a Catholic university for a year and a half.
Nerd.
Nerd.
I went to Catholic high school too.
I am absolutely a nerd.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Should we go to number 4?
Read the 4th one.
Okay.
The 4th degree.
We see. I actually, you know what? Maybe this is where I actually just got what I said from
you put
here.
the Philly twist
I didn't
on
even
it?
really realize it. We see things in the world that vary in degrees of goodness, truth, nobility, etc. For example, well-drawn circles are better than poorly drawn ones. Healthy animals are better than sick animals. Moreover, some substances are better than others, since living things are better than non-living things, and animals are better than plants.
Some substances are definitely better than others. I agree with that one.
In testimony of which no one would choose to lose their senses for the sake of having the longevity of a tree. Yeah, go worship trees, buddies. But judging something as being more or less implies some standard against which it is being judged. Basically, the standard would be infinity and nothing, right?
Yep.
More or less, those are the ultimate bounds of that. For example, in a room full of people of varying heights, at least one must be the tallest. Therefore, there is something which is best and most true and most a being, as in infinite. Aquinas then adds the premise, what is most in a genus is the cause of all else in that genus. For this, he deduces that there exists some most good being which causes goodness in all else, and this everyone understands to be God. It's a very similar. All of them follow the same. It's basically the same argument 5 times, but it comes.
And that's what I said at the beginning of this.
But
he does the same thing with each one. But see,
the genius of it is that it's relatable in 5 different aspects of life. The basic idea of a cause and effect, the basic idea of things that move, and there has to, we observe a set of reactions that all impinge on each other, but that couldn't have started of itself. It is. I mean, it's the 5. It's 5 ways of showing people the same concept in different aspects of what you can observe.
And all you have to do is grasp one. How can you relate to one?
Yeah.
I think maybe that's why. Now that I think of it, maybe it brings some justice for him doing the same thing 5 fucking times, because basically the more time repetitiveness, right? You're gonna get fucking one of them. Is his idea, and if you can grasp one,
yeah. Which one's your favorite so far?
Probably one of the first 2, to be honest. To me,
just the first cause, because cause and effect is abstract.
Yeah,
and you can observe how it holds in material reality, but the idea itself is abstract. Movement is something you see.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the uncaused cause is my favorite.
I feel like that's the toughest one to disprove.
Exactly.
Also, I think that's probably the most general one. Probably why it's the first one, because most people can grasp that.
The
one.
unmoved mover is first.
Really? Okay.
Yep. All right. Should we go?
Let's finish it.
Do number 5.
Yeah,
all right.
We got to. We're not going to just do 4 and stop.
Yeah.
It is almost 8:23, so we'll do number 5.
All right.
We got a 9 o'clock out. Phil's got to get up early.
You might have to retitle
we'll do the 5.
this.
We'll do 5. Do the conclusion of the episode. Read chat.
Can you retitle a stream?
Yeah.
Okay. You're going to have to do that with this. We didn't.
But you know what's funny?
We didn't get to the inflation or markets or anything.
I feel like. So we started off with Roe versus Wade, and it may seem like we got off topic, but I think we can bring it all back here. No, the end. Actually,
this is the kind of stuff that actually makes the whole which position do you take on abortion thing interesting.
Yeah,
because it really, through this lens, you can see so much in the different abortion positions.
Mm-hmm. You can.
So, Quinta Via.
Other than you're a baby killer.
I'm not going to make a license plate that says it, but so we see various objects that lack intelligence in the world behaving in regular ways. This cannot be due to chance, since then they would not behave with predictable results. So their behavior must be set. But it cannot be set by themselves, since they are non-intelligent and have no notion of how to set behavior. Therefore, their behavior must be set by something else, and by implication, something that must be intelligent. This everyone understands to be God. I think that's actually the best one. The uncaused cause is just the most fundamental. I think this is actually the best one.
Also known as a theological argument. However, it is not a cosmic watchmaker.
Do you know what? Okay. Click on teleological argument.
Teleological argument.
Look at this absolute outburst of bullshit. You know what? You know what people use that word for?
What?
People use the word teleology, and what they say that is they say, well, it's something that's true, but it's not useful.
And this is the definition of it.
Hold
on, for people listening, this is one, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs. Some
absolutely psychotic.
So you don't agree with this, is what you're saying?
No, it's absolute fucking nonsense. No, the only reason anybody uses this is to make a claim that, I'll give you credit for, the statement you're making is true, but it doesn't actually impact on reality at all. That's what they did to Mises. They said this is a teleology. That's what they called it.
So they're saying you're right, but it doesn't matter.
That's why people will ever use this word. I don't even think that's what the word actually means. But that's how people frame the word.
Is this how what atheists do to people? Oh, that's a theological.
Constantly.
That's theological, man.
No, why don't you read a little bit of it? I got to go use the facility quick.
Okay, sounds good. The teleological argument, also known as physico-theological argument from design or intelligent design argument, is an argument for the existence of God, or more generally, that complex functionality than the natural world, which looks designed as evidence from an intelligent creator. The earliest recorded versions of this argument are associated with Socrates in ancient Greece, although it has been argued that he was taking up an older argument. Plato and Aristotle developed complex approaches to the proposal that the cosmos has an intelligent cause, but it was the Stoics who are basically like I think Phil will correct me if I'm wrong on this, but they were guys, they're kind of like the government back in the day. I want to say they're the government, they're the word of mouth, they're the people that are really good at language and speaking, and they would go out to just like random streets and just start like preaching the world. Kind of what what's the religion now? They go knock on your doors. What Mormons do now? That's what Stoics did. Develop the battery of creationist arguments, broadly known under the label the argument from design. Abrahamic religions have used the teleological argument in many ways, and it has long association with them. In the Middle Ages, Islamic theologians such as Al-Ghazali, if I'm saying that right, used by the argument, although it was rejected as unnecessary by Quranic literalists and unconceiving by many Islamic philosophers. Later, the teleological argument was accepted by St. Thomas Aquinas and included as the 5th of his 5 ways. So, was the teleological argument came before Aquinas and his 5th argument?
I guess.
That's what that just said.
The first time I got exposed to that was reading Mises, and what's so crazy is that he sets up the way that he looks at exchange and the way humans actually behave in reality. He uses logic to establish conclusions that politically motivated overlords don't like. And so they slap this label on it. It's all and these words that they use to, like, the ontological argument or the teleological, it's always used as a slight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only used by people who have absolutely no ability to withstand what is being presented. They just don't like it.
So Aquinas basically, they're saying that he took that and put it into his 5 ways. I think you can also make the argument, or what Aquinas actually did, he took that and actually disproved them.
Yes, exactly.
And instead of seeing them, do
you want to know what
say that this disproves his 5th principle? But
tell me, is there
the way around?
Can you search the page for a word?
Yeah.
Search the page for the word information.
There it is.
Okay. So this is talking about
that's one
materialist natural science ignored information which was needed in order to okay, so that's not what I'm talking about. Is there another instance? Can you go to a next instance if there is? Okay, that's
Page
not it.
information.
Genetic info. No, that's not it. Actually, go back. Can you go back to the prior one, the genetic information one?
I don't know. Wait, I think it's after this one.
Okay.
Read it out loud. Sorry.
This isn't concerning. I'm not seeing anything about what I'm about to say.
Okay.
It's so weird because the only way you can get to this confrontation is with godless materialism to start with. So these pinheads, they love talking about black holes.
Mm-hmm.
You know why? Because one, you have to lie to people about things to even believe they exist. I mean, you know what a black hole is defined as?
Something that sucks everything into space.
A black hole is what occurs,
destroys it, or sends it back in time.
When you have a great enough gravitational force produced by mass that is so strong that the ability of condensed matter to withstand that force fails, and everything collapses into a singularity. Nobody has ever, and it will never, ever observe a point of infinite density. It will never happen.
So
Yet it's one of their favorite things to talk about. And why? Because it's a lie. People who operate in godless materialism are godless. They have no qualms whatsoever about morally violating your existence as somebody who actually values the other people around you. That's why it's a two-level thing. It's godless or Satan worshiping overlords and everybody else who actually sees themselves in other people and understands that if you do something to somebody that you don't like, it's probably not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
These people have no apprehension about doing that to people whatsoever. The funny thing is that out of their zeal for doing this to the population in general, they created a thing that other smart people who weren't in on the gag figured out was a big problem. And it's called the black hole information paradox. They don't have any way to explain it away, but they do know that information
can go on forever.
It's independent of material. And the only way for information to exist as we understand it is if there's a mind involved. If all you have is particles and energy bouncing around, you don't really have information. Because what's the point?
But information figures out that there's particles and energy around.
Information doesn't do anything. It's something that is, it's an understandable like residue of existence itself. Everything that we observe follows order in some way, as long as it's something that's not making choices. See, protons and electrons and neutrons, they don't make choices. Water waves don't make choices. Air molecules in the atmosphere don't make choices. Chemicals in beakers don't make choices.
And that's why we can predict how they're going to act.
And that's why we're able
figure out shit.
Yeah, that's why we're able to engineer things and make gadgets and do accounting and make decisions.
Make TikTok videos.
Everything.
Yep.
Right? None of that information could have generated itself. The only way for this scenario to come into play as we understand it is if there is a mind that created the information that governs the resulting material. It's the only logic that makes any sense. As soon as you deviate from it, you end up with all sorts of absolute nonsense. You can say anything at that point. You can say a black hole is a portal to a white hole on the other side of the universe. Never going to observe it.
White holes are racist.
You're never going to observe it. It's never going to happen.
White holes are racist.
They say all sorts of absolutely ridiculous shit that you could never observe. One of my favorites. See, Mises breaks his entire study of everything down to a singular starting point. People choose, right?
Yep.
And what do these frickin' dingbats do? They come up, what do you think? another unprovable scenario to explain away the idea that we're making choices. It's so on its face absurd. But people, science! It's the dumbest shit on earth. And people believe in it. The multiverse. Dude, the reason that guy ran a car through a parade is because it's one of an infinite number of possibilities. And there are infinite universes. So it had to happen somewhere. And this is the universe where we saw it happen.
It's also the universe Trump on president.
Do you want to know what else is really stupid?
We've had a lot of shit.
You want to know what else is really stupid? They also use this. They also use this to explain away the arrow of time.
What the fuck's the arrow of time?
The arrow
like
of
some
time.
Video game shit.
So when you write down physics equations, they have equations that they call time invariant. Because if you change the sign of the time variable, it's still a valid thing. You can run time forward or backward on paper or in a computer or whatever. So what, the time diagram of a ceramic cup falling off of a table, positions up here, time's going this way. And as time goes on, it falls off the table. And then you've got a bunch of graphs as time goes on showing where all the pieces went. Mm-hmm. And eventually you get to a point where everything stops moving and now you're just watching stuff sit on the floor. Now you can write that, you can, do an equation to describe that forward in time, and then you can make time negative and do an equation for that reversing itself. What do we never observe? Despite the fact that we're in an infinite multiverse where everything happens. You never see a broken coffee cup jump off of the floor, put itself back together, and land on a table.
You do when you're on DMT.
Oh, we could go into that too.
Yeah.
All these wingdings with their, you get a couple dozen people together to do DMT, and then you all talk to the same entity.
Ooh.
Everybody sees the same frickin' thing. Why? I mean, it actually tells you in the Bible, if with intent you practice pharmakia, and basically all that was consuming substances to alter your mind for specific purpose. It's basically summoning demons. If that's what you're doing, if you take DMT with the idea that you're going to see some kind of, neon lit fractal portal open in the wall and some little fucking demon elf is going to come out, he's going to come and visit you.
He's going to put it in your butt. Jesus says, let's smoke DMT, Phil.
I'm not doing it.
So you're saying, when you do DMT, you summon demons in your mind.
If you do it with intent,
in your body.
There are plenty of people who do it who never.
I've done DMT. That would explain where I got my demons from.
Did you actually talk to an entity?
Well, I just did it because we wanted to get fucked up.
And what's funny? I mean, this is a Joe Rogan podcast.
I changed to a Joe Rogan podcast.
No, that was one of the. I watched a whole. He had one of these DMT group ingestion.
Group
one of these things. They get people together and everybody sits down together and does it.
They did it. God, I did. Okay, so I was with people, but we took turns doing it.
Okay.
We were kind of scared. We were a little pussy on it. So basically, all right, and it doesn't last very long either. So I would take it. I took a fucking just fat ass rip of it. My buddy just pushed me down in the couch, lay down. I just fucking tripped nuts for a little bit. Almost to the point where I started I was like, oh my God, I'm about to maybe freak out, I was able to keep my self-control though and just write it out. Then we took turns.
So
we didn't want us all to fucking be on it, just in case.
Was your experience just sensory elevation?
Yeah.
So you didn't see lights or shapes or anything?
But I wasn't looking for it. And it makes me wonder if you go into the group and you go into it with the mindset, I'm going to do it with these group of people and I'm going to try to find something. I'm going to try to discover an entity, or I'm going to find this. How much that actually affects your experience with it? Because I did not go into it with that mindset. I went into the mindset as I want to get fucked up. And I really like hallucinogenics too.
Yeah.
The geometrical fucking figures that you see when you're on DMT and on some of these fucking hallucinogens, dude, they're just, man, I wish I could fucking just take a picture with my brain, and what you're seeing on these things. That was my main reason for wanting to do it. And that's what I experienced, though.
Yeah.
So you got whatever mindset or whatever you want, whatever experience you want to have when you do DMT, if you can put it in your head before you take the hit, maybe you can just make everything come to life. Convince yourself into everything. Maybe that's a good way to like get rid of depression, or find closure to things. I'm gonna get over this bitch. I'm gonna get over this. Well, I'm gonna heal from this.
You know what I find shocking?
You take up just a fat rip of DMT and then you heal.
When people talk about this stuff and this particular idea comes up with people doing it in a group and seeing the same entity having a discourse with it, that what they think that they're accessing a dimension or something, and it's just the explanation has been available for forever. It's a pretty well stated prohibition on doing those kinds of things. If you don't understand that it's a sin and you just keep doing it, I don't know what happens to you with that. But I know that if you earnestly ask forgiveness for doing things that are like a strict prohibition like that, you'll receive it. And it doesn't impinge on like a Joe Rogan podcast group of people at all. And it's just bizarre to me. It's like they really do. It's like they just want to popularize shit to drag people into their cesspool. I mean,
so
I just thought
everyone who's in the.
I mean, am I really that
Joe
weird?
Rogan DMT cesspool?
Am I really that? Am I that weird?
I'm a part of many cesspools.
Am I the only person that ever watched one of those segments that he did about that?
Oh man!
And actually thought to myself, that sounds like. That sounds like basically the fight against God by living man that's in the Old Testament. And it just doesn't occur to them at all. But you know what those people also love to do? They love to tell you about everything in the Bible. But then when something smacks you right in the face that's plain as day sitting right there for you to, it's not like it's some kind of a secret passage in the frickin' Bible.
Ginger Jesus hard disagrees with
I would just think that people who are such authorities on how much nonsense is in the Bible would at least know that that's there and maybe go back and look at it, but it just doesn't impinge on them at all.
Doesn't click.
I mean, it's bizarre. And you know what else?
Making me laugh right now.
This stuff
give me the giggles.
It's absolutely insane. All of this pride stuff. What is the deadliest of the 7 deadly sins?
What?
It's pride.
Yeah, but that could be just a fucking coincidence, dude. Words have 2 definitions nowadays, multiple meanings.
Oh, yeah. Well, do you know why it's being made into a public spectacle?
Why?
Because the judgment against those who actually go out and publicly declare that their sin is some kind of a positive thing, you do not want to be in that group.
I mean, if you look at it from the meaning of what my sexuality is versus the meaning of, I guess you could say the original definition of it, where it's like, I'm too prideful to do this. You think of it, you have this cocky attitude, this stubbornness, that you're the shit.
The way I like to describe pride is that a faithful person who has an exceptional capacity in something says, I was gifted that and I'm thankful. These people, they say, this is what I am, and it's all because of me, and they're not thankful for shit.
I think they say this is what I am, and I'm thankful, and they just want to be accepted for it. There's like 2 definitions of the word pride.
No, people who
that's my opinion.
Do you know what? You know what people who want to be accepted do? They go and interact with other people, and they are accepting of how successful they are with other people.
Yeah.
They don't gin up hatred for people who do not like them and then lead bands of people in public to attack them and everything about life that they hold dear.
I think hatred.
Do you see that bifurcation?
I see what you're saying, but hatred was generated on both sides, though. They generated hatred towards everyone else, and other people also generated
Let's
hatred
take it straight back to the beginning.
That's what everyone
Let's
does
take
with
it
relationships.
Straight. No, absolutely not. Holy shit. You want to tell me if there's an equivalence here. People go to an abortion clinic with a sign, or even in some case, I saw one story that was absolutely freaking heartbreaking. A woman who just would stand outside of the clinic and just approach all of the young women going in and try to engage with them in an attempt to dissuade them from going in and having an abortion.
Okay, so I want to know how she would engage with them. Some do it in a more peaceful manner than others.
This woman she's the little old lady in the front row at church. I
believe it, yeah.
Right?
And she just wants to talk to you.
Absolutely.
She's not out there throwing shit and
absolutely
yelling shit,
meek.
which some crazy motherfuckers do.
And she's engaging in it to save the life of the unborn child that's walking past her, because she knows what's going to happen when they go in. Now, I understand there are people who have attacked and bombed abortion clinics, but you're never going to find that little old lady endorsing that. Switch the roles around and it's completely inverted. You've got people minding their own freaking business, running a nonprofit that's actually there to help the young women decide not to have an abortion. You know how they always say, well, if you're going to ban abortion, why don't you care? You don't give a shit about the kids when they're born. What are you talking about? There are pro-life supporters all over the place with the little organizations that do exactly that. It's so disingenuous. But then the kicker is that big inversion that I was talking about. You're hard pressed to find anybody in the leadership of this absolute right to abortion on demand for any reason. You are not going to find a single one of them condemning the fire bombings of these little pro-life offices. Not a single one. You'll find some of their political face people out in the media saying, well, we don't want anybody firebombing anything, but they almost always immediately qualify that violence with the hatred of those pro-life people. It's like there's no hatred. There's none.
It's like they use the argument, you hate me more than I hate you, therefore
I'm justified.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because you hate me more.
It's absolutely demented.
It's a good argument to use if you want to win. Let's see, Ginger Jesus, but they aren't the ones they are talking about. LOL, they are talking about the anti-abortion people who don't do anything aside from bitch about abortion.
Well, you don't need to actively be doing anything to be correct. Just like we started with. Do living things come from non-living things? No, the only thing that we observe with our eyeballs are living things giving birth or splitting into more living things. You've got the single cell reproduction thing where they just make a copy of their nucleus and the cell splits.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got sexually reproducing animals like mammals, where you have the meeting of two, reproductive cells like a sperm and an egg, and the new genetic code for that species comes together, and then that first cell starts to divide the same way. Those cells, they become specialized and they turn into hands and eyeballs and a brain and a circulatory system and blood and bones and genitals. And it's all there to be seen very quickly. Whether or not you can see it is irrelevant, because there's no point in the sequence where there's no life. A born baby is only the end of a sequence that is life continuing. There's no massive cells to be thrown away because it's not a person. No, it's a person when the two cells come together. And the Bible puts that beautifully too. I knew you before you were anything.
Are you willing to let the Bible come into your life when you don't believe in God or have any religion? And at what point are you willing to end that life and be okay with it to a degree? Couple weeks, 4 weeks, 9 weeks. I think that's a question that everyone has a different answer to nowadays. Just about, at least. I know I have a different one from Phil. For sure.
I just think that today, if you're an actual inquisitive, like a person who really wants to know about all of the aspects, all of the information that's available on these topics, you gotta go and look for them. And if you find them, you're gonna get new ways of seeing things that you would have never imagined before. I mean, if you go and find some of the information on, how do you explain the first cell in the evolution argument? That's some of the most illuminating material that you can ever go looking for, because it's stark. It's a stark contrast. And when the people that understand that life did not generate itself, like Aquinas, eloquently points out, the way that the people who support this spontaneous generation view, they have nowhere to go when you actually ask them to explain anything. And it's the same thing with the ones that trace the tree of life by digging shit up out of the ground. It's the same thing that you get from the people who claim to have all of this deep time knowledge from dating rocks and shit. They can't actually explain any of it. They just say we have a process and we know. Meanwhile, anybody who takes their freaking textbook and applies the tests that they actually perform to engage in this magical knowledge of millions and billions of years ago, you don't get the results. They don't happen. And then you go into a museum of natural history as a graduate student in paleontology, and you get clearance from
Dinosaurs.
somebody who doesn't know the surprise that's coming, because none of these storytelling, non-scientific expounders on everything about deep time and shit, they don't know what's going to happen. And so the graduate student goes into the museum and cracks open a T-Rex bone.
Oh shit. Probably a big fucking bone.
And what do they find?
Life.
Well, they find organic material that could not possibly have been fossilized 65 million years ago. They actually pull tissue out of the bone, blood vessels that are still stretchy. It's absolutely asinine.
So dinosaurs, so what you're saying is dinosaurs were alive for much longer than we think? Or
Since the Earth was created,
they didn't die
obviously.
Yeah.
But you have to understand that the Earth was created. See, here's another thing. You go to the godless materialists and their explanations. They never have one. Okay, so there's this seed that exploded. Well, where'd the seed come from? Well, it was infinite. It was all of the universe mass in an infinitely small point. Okay, you know about points of infinite density? You've observed those? No. Okay, so you don't know that that's even possible. Two, what's the measurable instance after this where you can understand what the density of the thing that's no longer infinitely small is? There's no way to understand that. None of it. They're every step of the way. Okay, well, how do stars form? Well, stars form from collapsing gas clouds. A cloud of gas collapsing under its own gravity has never been observed. Nobody's ever going to see that because the laws that we have mathematically backed up. Observationally, the math has been backed up. The way gases behave, gases spread out. The only way,
just think of a fart.
The only way you get
spreads out.
The only way you get
goes through
gas
the whole
pressure.
Fucking house sometimes.
The only way you get gas pressure is with a boundary,
and that boundary is your butthole.
Then, well, how did the planets form? Well, after the gas cloud collapsed, there was all this other debris, and it spun around, and then big chunks in there started to spin around. They can't reproduce that. Never observed it. Never going to observe it. So there, you've already got 4 things that they don't have any explanation for, but they are absolutely ingrained in their narrative. Then you get to the whole, then all of the gases and the water and the stuff and lightning and a cell. Well, you can't demonstrate that assertion. You're never going to observe it. Never will. Then we move on. Well, how do you know that that people evolved 250,000 to 1 million years ago or whatever? Well, we dug stuff up out of the ground, and okay. So there's never an actual coherent explanation. People get, and I fell victim to it
Phil's
too.
narrative is the one in the Bible.
When I was in school,
Jesus.
Well, don't see,
because he says he's incredibly confused by Phil's narrative.
I'm not a kid that was born in a church, lived in a church, and walked out of a church to say this stuff. I went to a private grade school. Yep. I went to a private high school. But I was screwing around with all of my classmates that weren't in private school, right? Exposed to plenty. I stopped going to church. I worked for my dad as a tax accountant. My dad passed away. I lost my desire to do that work anymore because I liked working for my dad. The work actually pissed me off most of the time. Okay. I
can imagine.
After that happens, I go and start studying things on my own. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I do have faith in God. What am I supposed to do? I haven't met a wife. I'm not married. I'm in my early 30s. Am I going to have kids? Am I going to have a family? Yeah. Or what's going to happen? But I dedicated myself to trying to understand some things because I thought when I was coming out of high school, because you graduate valedictorian, you're supposed to do great things, right? So I go to school for physics like an idiot. I get the degree because I got good enough grades to get through it, but it doesn't mean that you're capable of doing anything. So you had to do something else. So anyway, I'm thinking back on that. What am I supposed to? So I start thinking, well, how about the stuff that I've been working on with my dad for the past decade before he passed away? Doing the Rush Limbaugh radio thing, and how does this shit really fit together? The economics and the government and the voting and the policy and the law and the crime and just all of it, and the banking and the money and all of it, right? And I find Mises after I don't know how many years.
So Mises ties into your narrative of God.
Exactly. Because when you read Mises, he puts on just a logically deduced display how human beings actually operate.
By Mises, he's talking about Ludwig von Mises, Austrian economic.
Yes. And when you...
Just I want to say that just in case anyone listening to this.
And when you just take the
Phil talks about Mises a lot. You will get very familiar with Mises if you listen to Phil.
Yeah. The secular impact of Mises doing the work that he did to create a single coherent picture of how all of the economic aspects of life are intertwined and related and ultimately reduced down to the fundamental element of choice. It paints a perfect parallel with Jesus giving individuals instructions about how to live their life so that they can be reunited with him after we die in everlasting life. The instruction while we're here is clear, and the logical secular, the deducing of the conclusions on people making choices are inescapable. There is no groupthink or collective or stupid theory of, the powers of history operating on everybody. None of that can ever produce a coherent conclusion. All of that cannibalizes itself, always. And that's why when you approach whatever you're doing as a group, it ends up eating itself. Because people are self-interested, and not all of us actually have any faith in anything good or real. All it is I want power so I can get what I want, and I don't care what happens to you. And if that's not observable, what is? The people who do it, they actually make their entire bit off of convincing huge numbers of others that the people they oppose are the ones responsible for doing it to them. It's absolute insanity.
So smoke TMT and speak to demons. You just got it. You are correct, sir.
Ah, God.
Phil, after listening to you sometimes, I feel like maybe you did smoke the DMT.
No, never did.
Well, that's his narrative, Ginger Jesus, and you'll learn more about it when you come back here. It's past 9 o'clock, Philly, so...
It is already?
Yeah.
God dang, I just ran at the mouth like no
I
tomorrow.
did, so I didn't want to cut you off. I'll let you go for an extra 5 minutes. Fuck, dude, I'd sit here for another hour with you, but you gotta get up early.
Yeah, I gotta get home and eat some dinner, too, before I go to bed. Oh, look at that, crotch goblins.
Chat says they're gonna get Phil to smoke DMT.
No, not gonna. I'm not interested. I have my vices that I enjoy.
You've done mushrooms or acid, right?
I did do acid a couple times.
That's what I thought.
The first time I did it, I played 3D Tetris on my friend's virtual reality.
Oh, dude, I got an Oculus too.
Oculus, yeah, that was it. Oh my God, the flying Tetris stuff. Holy, you do well if you want to have fun with your trip. That one pays off.
Okay.
Especially if you like Tetris.
You got fucking just giant blocks. I don't know, might make it freak the fuck out too. Anyway, here, cheers, Philly. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you, Ginger Jesus, and I'm excited for the conversations we're gonna have in the future. I appreciate everyone else who was hopping in and out tonight during the stream. And we'll be back again soon.
Yes.
It's been a while. It was a good time.
Try to make it weekly.
Sounds good. And I choose a Doug Life. The Doug Life chose me.
Philly out.